Mira lo que ha dicho del Barcelona. ¿Ya has dejado algo?
Sí, mi chaleta, siempre.
¿Dónde estás?
Ahora no.
Hasta ahora. Hasta luego. Solo puedo saber bueno.
Paula.
Perdona, que os interrumpa. ¿Vais a estar así?
No, yo me voy a ir, estoy recogiendo.
No, era porque voy a decir, si os quedáis un segundo más, por favor, porque voy a pedir una llave para...
Vale, yo me quedo.
vale.
En realidad es que querías que nos fuese.
No, voy a ir a por la llave para cerrar.
Sí,
porque si no es un rollo llevar todos los portátiles.
Vale, ahora vengo, gracias. Por favor, que nos bajes con la cosa. Yo estoy recogiendo, pues eso te digo.
Ya, pero es un embolsamiento.
Ya, pero esto es muy triste. Quiero decir, a ver, y aquí no hay cosas
No, por eso yo he dicho que la pregunta que me ha hecho esta chica de
mira,
sí, por mamá.
vamos a cerrar.
Sí,
Estamos esperando a que venga. Nos han pedido que nos quedemos.
Es que me dicen los comedores que hasta que no nos acordamos alrededor de las mesas no nos suben a dormir.
Ya pues, ir para allá, que estoy esperando a que vengamos.
No, pues cuando venga.
Pues nada, por eso te digo que me ha parecido fenomenal.
Y a ver, de
Lo que
manera
has dicho
general, claro que estamos formando.
Lo que has dicho tú, lo que han dicho los otros tres, o sea, es que, vamos a ver,
Bueno, lo dirás, tú sabes que cuando uno habla interpreta las cosas que quiera llevarlos en el camino, ¿sabes? Pero hay que... ¿Sabes qué pasa? Que con esa mentalidad es como la profecía autocumplida, porque claro, si yo solo puedo traducir, pobrecita yo, que me lo quita toda la máquina, pues entonces los otros trabajos los cojo otra persona. Yo digamos estudiantes. Terminar el grado y hacer un máster de publicidad. Vas a tener un montón de trabajo. Si no, ¿quién va a coger un trabajo en los publicistas? La gente que ha estudiado publicidad. Ah, sí, tal.
de verdad, es que a mí me parece que hay tantas posibilidades.
Bueno, pues porque a lo mejor se han quedado instalados en el siglo XX.
Ya, por la noche se callen. Que no digan esas cosas. Venga, venga, sí, que no tenga la llave
Para cerrar. Nos la pena aquí.
Bueno, y vete para allá, que yo espero. Mira, ya.
Ya está. Ahora voy a dejar esto. Silvia, aparte de, bueno, es muy breve para que habléis vosotros. Sí, hay una.
Y que me dedico, si quieres,
Bueno, que me publicaciones.
bueno, que me dedico a que me dedico a la tecnología tanto desde el punto de vista de la situación.
No voy a ver, voy a decir para la más que además, pero muchos cursos para que se va a sí. Y que son de los que tienen importancia, pero yo estoy intentando ver, o sea, de la subvención a ustedes con ellos. Sí, la verdad.
no sé este año cuántas cosas y
porque ahora es pero todo lo que sea estaría porque los
claro, yo voy a cerrar porque por aquí no van a saltar. Muy bien, nadie va a saltar. ¿No? ¿No? O sea, yo quiero pensar que nadie va a saltar.
Aquí hay un foso.
Ah, vale, vale.
Ahí hay un foso.
Bueno, pero yo qué sé, los caminos para el robo son variados. A ver, otra copa me queda limpia porque sois 3 presenciales. Y voy a dejar esto.
Entonces yo voy a cerrar. Bueno, yo me voy a poner aquí delante, ¿no? Porque donde tú quieras. Sí, porque en realidad esa una. Por cierto, estas pantallas eran muy mal. Donde no solo eso, ahora ya en la presentación del PowerPoint de esa pantalla,
Es
es
que esa es
que no
está
sé.
conectado.
Es que lo han hecho con el culo, es que no sé de lo que proyectan. Y las caras de la gente no hace falta que la veas así grande,
Claro.
porque estén en esas pequeñas,
Claro.
en esas
Pero está configurado que eso no lo puede tocar.
Pero aquí es el listo.
El que instaló cuando
No,
vino
es
todo
que...
informática, seguro.
Jodas. Y luego estás ahí en esa mesa, si no estás viendo bien ahora, coño, pon esa
Que
situación
veas a
para
la
que
gente.
veas a la persona.
No tiene
La verdad
nada.
es que lo hacen con el culo. También te digo que está aquí.
No sé exactamente a qué viene la señora. A qué señora se quiere ir. Claro, no sé si es por detrás, porque lo hacía hacer de aquí, pero es que hemos visto a un señor que de repente ha partido, no sé si te has tocado, pero no me deja. El señor haciendo así. Digo, ¿eso qué es? De hecho, me lo has recordado, tengo aquí mi libreta para hablar con Blanca. Tengo
¿Qué me ha
aquí,
dicho el oye, las presentaciones
tengo aquí mi libreta para hablar con Blanca, que de hecho, Tenemos todas limpias, ya están cambiadas. Estas están limpias y sucias no tenemos porque
entonces
ahora no se usamos. Está todo controlado. Si no, ya os habría llegado. Oye, gracias.
ahora.
Ahora mismo creo que ya no está.
Yo tengo mi llavero ya permanente.
Pero es enchufado.
Mira,
Yo casi que me corté de aquí, ¿no? De ahí, porque son 4.
Sí, entonces como allí
Son
se
3.
suponía. Lo que pasa es que para levantar o con tu micrófono que ya lo controlo, ¿sí? Te parece hello.
Chiquita, no sé si ponerme aquí o ahí. Es que para deciros todo el tiempo es mejor aquí.
Sí. Sí, yo creo que
Para enseñar los 5
mientras
minutos.
lo presentas 5 minutos, porque por ahí nos puso a debatir si quiere, o allí, cuando lo puse yo. Pero yo tengo mucho espacio, porque eso está como
3.
y solo está con
Pero tú, ya son 3.
mira, yo me necesito aquí.
Ahora por la hora que viene así, pues ya se la suelo sentar. Pues vamos a verlo.
Yo me puedo poner donde tú me digas.
No,
Porque yo voy a hacerlo de
cuando
pie.
puse la cámara ahora, más.
Y entonces,
más
a ver, yo
fácil.
las tengo que presentar,
Lo dejo todo por si
pero
acaso.
entonces me puedo poner aquí en las.
No, si pongo la cámara que lo pille todo, estamos para todas las opciones posibles.
Pues para todos.
¿Sabes? Si no hay.
Sí, porque ellos me.
Se va a poner esa aquí,
Para
para que no se
todos.
lo vean.
Sí, no, así tengo que tocar. Así que a ver,
Así para todas. Yo me muevo mogollón. Y lo que voy a hacer.
Mi presentación, pero no, lo he enviado a mi dirección que decía.
PowerPoint, lo que me han enviado, si no ha sido mientras comía, lo he copiado aquí.
Ah, bien.
Si ha sido después, ahora cuando llegue al ordenador lo copio. Debería estar,
Bueno, es que fue esta mañana que me.
debería estar en uno de estos. No sé. No recuerdo el nombre de cada persona.
Bueno, es que no sé si venía conmigo.
Un nombre de que reconozca. Bueno.
De traducción y accesibilidad.
Sí, porque ahí ya están cargadas las de Maripel.
A ver. EU Roundtable. Ahí está.
Está bien, ¿no?
Sí. Ahí está. Bien, bien. Yo estoy relajada.
¿Alguien más tiene que hablar de casa?
Creo que sí.
Sí.
Creo que hay alguien.
Sí, las dos personas.
Vale, entonces te cuento ese día.
Las tienen en mente. Las tienen en
Vale.
Silvia y yo.
Así estamos.
Vale, lo que me han enviado por correo, si no hay
No,
ningún
pero
momento,
ellas lo traen en frente.
no se puede.
Pero ellas es que lo traen en frente.
Ay, mi cosita, ¿dónde está?
Ah, ahí, creo.
¿Ah, sí?
Guay. Ya no está.
¿Y yo no me he cogido?
No lo puedo creer.
Me han robado mi bolsita.
A ver, la tendrá Pilar.
¿Pero qué te han robado? Mi bolsita.
No, la tendrá Pilar porque ya se reformó.
Ah, vale, o sea, no pasa nada.
Tiene que ser una de esas.
Pero eso no va por nombre, ¿no?
Van porque mi papá mañana tiene una suya.
Eso no sabía.
Una es tuya. Esta es suya.
Ah, es que
Es una venta.
Mira, nada,
Y
esta
esta
cosa
Sí,
sí que.
Y el paraguas
maravilla. Maravilla. Ah, el paraguas.
Sí, es una comisión muy bonita.
¡Qué guay!
Y un bolillo.
Y a Blanca ya le hemos dado.
Sí.
Y la otra persona que me queda es Silvia.
Esto es karma. Todos los paraguas que yo hice.
La teoría era mía.
Y la han vuelto ahora. Han vuelto.
Bueno, ya está, la dejo allí.
Claro que sea incluso para comprar el pan.
Es que yo no sabía que iban a dar algo así.
Bueno,
Gracias, no sabía.
debemos darle gracias a la comisión. A la UPR no le damos las gracias por nada. Bueno, sí, a la facultad, en fin. A Enrique.
Y a Enrique también en la recepción.
A Enrique, no, pero me refiero, digo por los regalos, hay que dárselo a la comisión y a Enrique por el fin.
Ya está.
Bueno,
Ya.
pero en fin, pero los paraguas.
Pero en fin, también lo mismo.
No, sí, bien por el fin, pero que no tenemos ni un botecito de agua ni.
No, ya. Bueno, yo eso.
Somos pobres.
Bueno, vamos a ver qué nos pasa en el Congreso. ¿Sabes que donde habría que ponernos lo de Linux?
Sí, no, en lenguaje es una cosa ya.
Ya se ha puesto.
Gigi.
Yo.
Sí, no me caía de problema. Eso estaba en la primera lista, porque de hecho estuve hablando con Ana y digo, ay, tengo que mirar lo de los artistas, claro. Digo, y lingüística, no, él quería mirar eso, mira, para.
Bien.
Mira, tú se te coges 4 funcionarios, ¿te para cámara a ti?
Sí, claro.
Sí,
Solamente el curso y
Sí, pues tú estabas. Pero
más que nada por lo bajado de la comisión.
Pero sí, no, yo soy la que
Sí, pensando, ahora voy a ese mismo.
y cuántos másteres.
Pero ¿qué marca?
Eso.
Si están, es porque
Pero
están por alguna razón.
No te puedo decir de mí. Ven que yo sé, aparte que es profesora americana.
Soy profesora Luisa, que
No
lo de ecodexicón, lo de
digo, son universidades así.
sí, que lo de Faber's terminology, que es lo utilizan en la y por lo menos alguien utiliza.
Claro, eso de nuestra propia licencia, es que.
Pero por favor, no digas más de 4 días.
No, si voy a decir, pero muy escuela, sí. O sea, no voy a decir que quiera decir algo más.
Sí, claro, que de toda la vida he trabajado en tecnología. Vamos, yo voy a explicar cómo llegué a la
Claro, por eso
tecnología.
tampoco quiero pisar a la gente, o sea, a lo mejor va a decir por un recorrido o no.
Ya está, que yo conseguí mi grado antes de que había, antes de que existía.
Y yo son tesis en stories que cabían que 14 páginas.
Sí,
Las
las
cosas de
cosas.
tecnología.
No,
Con esas pequeñitas que se
yo
meten en
las
los
tesis.
sitios y te lo leen, ¿no?
No, pero eran los copies de eso.
Ah, los discos, los clásicos, sí. Yo tenía de eso.
Sí, lo que pasa es que había 14 páginas.
14 páginas cada uno. Bueno, eso ya es el primero. Y una vez me dijo, cuando yo en los años 90 dije a alguien en clase, yo dije, quien no tenga ordenador no podrá traducir en el futuro. Una me denunció por clasista.
¿Qué?
Por clasista. Porque decía que entonces solamente los ricos podían traducir.
Bueno, lo bueno es que ciertas cosas sí se van migrando.
Bueno, hay que ver lo que se ha avanzado desde entonces. Clasista.
Sí, lo soy, pero no.
No por eso no.
Yo luego me siento aquí para poner los minutos.
Pues Luis,
¿Cómo está Mario? Ana, pero si
la
se habla con una familia, también no sé ninguna, pero luego te digo que sí, pero allá en Mayo, ¿no? Sí. Pero bien, ¿no? Sí, además
Eso
es lo que
son de dignidad muy en mi casa contenta.
Porque luego no se ve. Y también más adelante. Bueno, pues
Claro, ¿no? Digo yo ahora. ¿Y el micro está aquí? Sí. Te puedes poner en realidad donde quieras y muevo el cartel. Porque que puedes sentarte aquí, creo. Sí, pero me lo he puesto aquí porque en otro sitio lo cambio. Porque hay una de las chicas que no está. Porque está online.
Bueno, estoy bien. Siempre no creo que va a haber mucha gente hasta.
No, por la página no.
Bueno, mi nombre me suena fatal, Gregorio, con eso. Me suena fatal mi apellido, eso. Siempre tengo que decir, eso está conectado. Ya.
Ya sabes, luego hay grabaciones y salen por la tele.
Así. Hola, Pamela, soy Blanca Collazos. ¿Qué tal? Encantada, abrumada de compartir mesa contigo. Tu fama te precede.
Gracias.
Dime.
Tampoco voy a decir una cosa. Bueno, 10 minutos.
10 minutos no da para
Igual se aprovecha.
Tenemos suerte de que esta mesa sí tenemos
en línea, Paula Zorrilla, sí. A ver si funciona bien la técnica.
No. Está Dani, perdona. Blanca, está por ahí Dani para que metas ya el. Pero ponlo a ver si.
Primero va.
Pero los dejamos todos
¿Los
cargados.
dejamos todos cargados?
Sí. Y entonces esto se
O sea que yo se lo mandé porque Pilar me mandó una presentación diciendo había que mandarlo a...
Yo se lo mandé.
Entonces...
Pero a ti no, se lo mandé.
No, debe estar entonces aquí. El mío está aquí.
¿Puede ser este?
¿Así?
Este no.
No, será este.
No.
El mío se titula algo así.
Sí, mi programa estaba aquí.
Se pone la zorrilla.
Si tú lo has mandado, no voy a hacer quietos, pero a ver.
¿Sabes?
Yo no me voy a Pilar y a los intérpretes.
No, entonces esto era otro.
Voy a copiarlo porque no está en el ordenador.
Y nos oirá ya Paula. Hola Paula, ¿nos oyes?
Hola, sí, os oigo bien.
Vale, perfecto. Hola.
¿Vosotros a mí?
Soy Ana. Sí, te oímos bien.
Hola.
Probablemente luego para la interpretación te pidamos que subas el volumen
De
tuyo
acuerdo.
de micro.
Vale, lo tengo
Te lo
ya,
adelanto ya
lo tengo
porque es
ya
el-
al máximo. Lo tengo ya al
¿Lo
máximo.
tienes al máximo ya? Vale, pues ahora
Ujú.
le pregunto a los intérpretes si te oyen bien, ¿vale?
Vale, perfecto.
Ahora te digo.
Gracias.
que no quería, sobre todo porque tengo fotos aquí, ¿no? ¿Y tú sigues dando clases?
Doy clases en el máster y también soy
De terminología.
bueno, de traducción específica.
Paula, ¿puedes hablar para la intérprete, por favor?
Sí,
Para ver
hola,
si te oye.
¿me escucháis bien? ¿Me oís bien?
Por ahí por el mundo, un compañero mío.
Tengo el
Pone cara a
volumen.
la intérprete de regular.
¿No? Tengo el volumen
No,
al
pero no es problema
máximo,
tuyo,
voy a
probablemente.
mirar a ver si
Vale.
todavía...
Bueno, que
Intentaré
todavía hay
hablar
tiempo,
alto,
pero...
intentaré hablar lo más alto posible.
Una plaza
Ahora
Se
mejor,
conforma.
quizás mejor así.
PDT,
¿Mejor?
Mejor ahora, pregunta Nan. That's what it is, ¿no?
Sí, lo tengo al máximo, sí.
Vale, no te preocupes.
Creo que puedo
Simplemente-
subirlo más.
Pues ya está, ya.
Hablaré lo más alto que
Ahora
pueda.
también es que hay ruido aquí de fondo en la sala,
Sí,
porque
quizás.
estamos entrando.
Sí, quizás hay alguna interferencia. De acuerdo.
Ah, bueno, si yo miro al frente, tú me ves, ¿no? Sí. Porque la cámara te estoy saludando, se me ve, ¿no? Vale.
Sí, te veo, te veo.
Esto de los enfoques.
teníamos que aprenderlo nosotros.
En la práctica fue la otra cosa. En la práctica
Era the hard way.
teniendo la suerte de trabajar con esos veteranos que eran calidad, ¿no?
Pues para que no tuvieron ellos que aprender como aprendí yo.
Ay, sí, no te la he dado porque ya me la dado la bolsa. A la tengo ahí. Bueno, el ordenador se queda aquí en medio, no se puede mover.
Sí lo podemos mover.
A verlo para una vez cada hora. Era la silla central. Y ahora cuando acabemos me dará el... Bueno, como esto es lo que de tomar el café me gana.
Aprender español y luego ya tuve que rehacer mi vida porque yo había hecho en Estados Unidos comunicación, ciencias de comunicación y tiempos de Franco que no había intenté desde primero y ahora
Yo luego lo que voy a hacer es coger las copas, son limpias, ¿vale? Las he puesto limpias las copas por si queréis echaros ya agua. Yo os voy a chingar una de agua aquí. Esto en realidad tendríamos que tener más. Bueno, buenas tardes. ¿Se me oye bien? Sí. Voy a ver.
Good evening,
ya.
can you hear me all right? Okay, so good evening.
De nuestro
Welcome
taller.
to the second part of our workshop. For those of you who are not familiar with us, I'm Ana Cano, and we have 3 speakers here on site and 1 remotely online. I'm going to briefly introduce our colleagues here, the participants in the roundtable,
Exactamente.
and then they can directly speak about their topic. So we will introduce them all now. First of all, we have Dr. Pamela Faber, Emeritus Professor of our department, of our faculty. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of having her as a trainer. Otherwise, you will have the opportunity to talk to her later in the coffee break or later on. She's part of the Lexicon Research Group, very much present here and in general in the audience. Can you hear me all right? I am having a bad time because of the interpreters, so I hope they can hear me all right. She's the founder of the terminology based on frames. The pressure of introducing an emeritus professor. Sorry.
De este lapsus.
Apart from this, she is going to tell us, I suppose, she's going to tell us about her career. She's been trained in terminology. So those of you who are interested, it's the opportunity to talk to her about that. And then this, I believe, will be the order unless there's any technical change that forces us to change it. Silvia Montero, from our department and Director of Linguistic Services of the University of Granada, just like Pamela, she has many publications dealing with terminology and beyond. Then we also have Blanca Collazos Sánchez, who's translator and terminologist in the DGT. She has a degree in philology. For those of you who are not, do not have a degree in translation, you can do it, you can achieve it. You can be trained in philology and then be in the institutions, although it has been said earlier already. And she also worked in the UN in New York. And we have a participant remotely. We can see her all the time. No pressure, but we can see you. She's Paula Zorrilla Agut from the Jaume I University in Castellón. She did a PhD in terminology, the postgraduate course in terminology, sorry, and she works as a terminologist in the Terminology Center of the Union, and she will probably speak to us about AITE. So first of all, I will give the floor to Pamela Faber.
Thank you very much. I hadn't thought to do this, but
Gracias, muchas gracias. No pensaba hacerlo, pero todos les dicen a todo el mundo cómo llegaron a terminología o a dónde llegaron, etc. Y por supuesto, por mi edad, cuando estudiaba, las escuelas de traducción no existían en realidad. Y por supuesto, no tengo un grado en traducción. Yo llegué a la traducción y la terminología de la manera difícil, de la manera muy difícil. Porque bastante de repente, cuando yo no había pensado en hacer nada parecido a esto, alguien me contactó de los puertos del Estado. Me dijeron que querían que tradujese un libro de 700 páginas sobre cómo construir puertos.
First, just tell me a little bit, how long would I have? And he said, 1 month. I said, what? 1 month? And he said, yes, we've already been through 2 translators who bombed out. And one was an engineer, another one was a native speaker. They couldn't do it. They threw in the towel. And we need you. And I said, but he said, I know you can do it. I said, no, I can't. But how much are you going to pay? And he said, 1 million pesetas. Welcome to engineering. So I have expensive children. So I did. And I did it in 1 month. And after that, I did a lot more books on maritime engineering. And I learned a lot about terminology and translation. But I learned that there were no good resources. I knew that I had to figure things out for myself, and I had to make my own resource. And that was the beginning of Ecolexicon, which is a freely available resource online, Ecolexicon UGRS, and it's become very popular for people who want a translation-friendly terminological resource. So I'm going to talk here about terminology, of course, and I'm going to talk about terminology work. Not only terminology work for terminologists, but terminology work for translators. So we all know that terminologists, their work, hardcore terminologists, what do? They describe domain-specific knowledge structures. They have to map out a specialized domain. They also have to organize and record meaning and how terms are used in term bases and other knowledge resources, or they should, because how terms are used, forget it. You get the term, maybe you'll get the equivalent correspondence in other languages. You may get a few other data fields,
but you don't get how it's used. You don't get what it's related to. And then that is why translation-oriented terminology has become so important. It's not terminology work by terminology, this terminology work by translators. Terminology as a discipline was recognized as a discipline in the middle of the 20th century. And I'm not going to talk about prescriptive approaches because someone I know is already going to do that. I confess that I don't like prescriptive approaches. Okay. Fortunately, terminology evolved. It began to evolve with Teresa Cabré and the communicative theory of terminology. And it became descriptive. It became timidly text-based. It became, well, now we're going to see how terms vary in different types of texts, and they do. And that was the widening of the scope of terminology, which was very positive. And then later on, not too much later on, the communicative theory, the descriptive approaches experienced a cognitive shift because we process language in our brains, obviously. And so that's very important. In fact, we have a mental lexicon. Our brain is the non plus ultra language processor. We can find the term or word that we want in just bits of a second. So that means here they're organized in a way that is very, very good. And if we can find the way how language and terms are organized in the brain, if we can put that on internet in a language resource, then we are made in the shade. So that was the ultimate goal. And so the cognitive shift in terminology put the focus on the conceptual network in specialized texts. It studied the interface between term meaning, semantics, and syntax. Now, in terminology, syntax is a dirty word. Nobody studies the syntax of terms, but it's important. It reflects how they are used. And the semantics of terms, their meaning, shows us how terms are related. So this led to translation-oriented terminological theories, such as Rita Temmerman's sociocognitive terminology and frame-based terminology, which was developed here in Granada. Now, these cognitive theories, they integrate premises from cognitive linguistics and psychology, insofar as how to organize terms and categorize them. So we're very, very proud of that. Terminology is a translation problem. And it's very important. Anyone who does specialized translation knows that they have to get the terminology right. If they don't, their text is not suitable. This is a very, very high parameter of translation quality. And so we have to train people in the use of translation technologies, computer tools and resources. We have to teach translators how to be closet terminologists. And when they do for their own purposes, then they're better translators. You really can't do a specialized translation. And I know from experience, just getting, oh, this is the term, I'm going to put it inside my text. It doesn't work that way. So we have in a text, we have the explicit knowledge in the text. And those are the terms. And if you're not a good translator, you're going to stay right on the surface. You're not going to go underneath to the rest of the iceberg. You're not going to try to establish correspondences between knowledge structures in one language and knowledge structures that are probably basically the same, but there could be differences. There often are differences. You have to know not only the explicit knowledge in the text, but what's going on beneath. If you don't, you're not going to be a good translator. And this is something also to be considered. So now, what translators have to do, they have to do translation-oriented terminology, taught. And I mentioned this a few years ago in a roundtable with Teresa Cabré, and she didn't like it because for some people, the only type of terminology management that you can do is for big places where you, like databases for Catalan or for whatever. And so in this process, what is done is that translators identify and understand the specialized concepts in the text. They have to evaluate, consult, and even sometimes create their own information resources. And they have to specify the interlinguistic correspondences between terms in a certain field. And they have to manage this data for future translations. Because I don't know anybody who's a legal translator and a medical translator. I don't know anybody who does legal translation and engineering translation. You just can't do both. You've got to you have to arrive at the threshold of knowledge. You don't have to be an engineer. I'm not. But it was funny because in the last international engineering conference that took place in Granada, I got abstracts to evaluate. And I ignored them. I said, this is a mistake. And they came back and said, why haven't you evaluated these abstracts? And I said, but I'm not an engineer. How can I do it? You're not? And they really thought, since I knew the terms, they thought that I was an engineer. That's how closed-minded scientists are. If you know the language, they believe that you're, oh shit. Okay, I'm sorry. So in the workflow, there's needs assessment of resource collection. There's term extraction and term selection. You have to do terminological research, which is you have to describe the concepts and the terms, and you have to do a constructive analysis. You have to revise what you've done, and you have to elaborate the entries. There's also quality assurance and maintenance and dissemination, but if it's your own resource, you don't do this. This is for something you can avoid, but it's on the list in case you want to really do it. And the ability to do all things is called terminological competence. That Silvia and I wrote an article about this. It's part of translation competence. And it's the ability to access the knowledge represented by terms, to select the best correspondence in the target language, and to develop strategies. The strategies, I mean, your terms where you have them in a database, that's one thing, but strategies are forever. So know how to do this. And so also terminological resources, are they suitable for translation? No, most of them aren't. They need more information, pragmatic information, textual information, cultural information. There are shades of meaning between different term variants, and we need to know about context. That is the secret of a good terminological resource, and there are different types of contexts, which I won't go into. And in conclusion, its translation has inspired terminology to evolve, thank God. And Translation-oriented terminology is a core part of specialized translation. That's why all of you learn terminology, not with me anymore. I have students who still have nightmares when I was here, but there is the need for more specialized knowledge resources for translation purposes. Thank you. Do you want to? We can change.
Pues ahora tiene la palabra Silvia Montero, si quieres. Sí. Pues adelante.
Y espera, porque esto es que está.
Ahora, es que no está en modo presentación. Vale.
Bueno, pues.
Thank you very much for the introduction, first of all, and also for inviting me to participate and share this session with our leader, our maestra, Pamela Faber. I'm also a member of Lexicon, but we don't agree on everything, but I think we have contrasting ideas, and it's a pleasure to be here with Blanca and Paula as well. I'm going to follow on from the theoretical overview that Pamela has given us. I'm going to go to the standardization, normalization part of our work, because in many contexts, this is going to enable us to generate language resources that translators need in corporate or institutional contexts. For example, this is our case in the University of Granada. Terminological standardization in English and Spanish at the universities here started in 2016. And we now have a language portal, which is constantly evolving. And we coordinated from the Language Services Unit at the Vice Rectorate of Internationalization. So to contextualize the work that we carry out in standardization, I would like to say there are quantitative studies, as you can see here on the screen. This is from the corporate world. And it's estimated that 70% of the time, different terms are used to refer to one single concept. And we can see this from another perspective too, where you can see this study too, that 85% of employees of these firms where this was carried out use different terms from their colleagues to refer to the same concept. So in addition to this, in the academic context, also exists here in the University of Granada. We have found documentation with different equivalents of the term rector of the University of Granada, the maximum figure of authority in state universities in Granada. We've seen different equivalents used in English in official documents. For example, president, director, rector, vice chancellor, and others as well that are not included here. Another clear example referring to the name of the academic degree that's studied here in this faculty, Faculty of Translation and Interpreting. We have seen undergraduate program in translation and interpreting, bachelor's degree in translation and interpreting, and even degree in translation and interpreting. The latter is extremely imprecise in an academic context, and particularly in academic documents. So this lack of consistency makes communication using official documents difficult and portrays a negative image of our institution. So to try to overcome this situation, we tried to design an institutional terminology management protocol, and secondly, to develop different institutional language tools to support standardization. And so we coordinate all these initiatives from the Language Services Unit. First of all, with regard to terminology management, Pamela spoke about it for translation. Obviously, the focus changes here because we're not focusing on translation. We understand the systematic creation and compilation of terms used in the documents and the services provided by the University of Granada. And we have a lot of international activity. So this is important. In the University of Granada, this is done by a team of terminologists, most of whom come from translation. We have a translation background. And their job is experts in formulating, describing, managing, and distributing multilingual regulated terminologies. To describe briefly what this consists of in our case, this kind of management aims at normalization. And basically what we do is to regulate the use of the proprietary terms of the University of Granada and the frequently used terms in our university's documents. We apply a series of criteria, it might be semantic transparency, language economy, etc. The final product of this normalization work is a repertoire of terms that we classify in a series of categories. And I'm going to show you the most important ones. First of all, we have proprietary terms. For example, the name of the University of Granada itself. And its official title in English is University of Granada. There are accepted forms, an abbreviated form, for example, UGR, that would be accepted. Another important category is that of terms that are not recommended. For example, for the translators and revisers, these terms are banned. You're not allowed to use them. Here in this category, we would include terms that don't fulfill the conventions established by the University of Granada for whatever reasons. I haven't got time here to go into the different criteria. If somebody wants to ask, I'll tell you afterwards in the debate. So Granada University is one of the non-recommended terms. With regard to the development of language resources to support our institutional language, we bear in mind that, institutional language rests basically on two pillars. Proprietary terminology, in other words, their own terminology, and the style guides that the institution may have to maintain its corporate image and its style. Therefore, first of all, to facilitate the dissemination of the standardized terminology in English and Spanish in the University of Granada, and for the members of staff, the draft text in English, after a lot of hard work, in 2018, we launched our database, UGR Term. UGR Term at the moment has more than 49,500 terms in about 22,500 entries, in other words, concepts. So it's an organic process. It's constantly evolving. At the same time, one or 2 years ago, we published an English style guide for drafting institutional texts, also drawn up by the Language Services Unit. It's based on standardized text conventions that we recommend for internal drafting of texts, with the aim of improving the quality of the texts that are being sent to our international partners, and to make these texts more consistent. And at the moment, we're working on the normalization, standardization of administrative documents in English. Those documents that are frequently used by our partners in our networks and alliances, and they're placed at the disposal of the users in the University of Granada in our language portal. We've given it more capacity so that we can include all the resources that we've developed. Obviously, we haven't got that many resources because we didn't start until 2016, but we haven't done badly. We have quite a lot. And to end, I'd like to talk about some of the advantages. One of our aims when we started to create language tools was, first of all, to improve institutional language, and secondly, to improve the image of the university. And then secondly, very important for any institution or company, compliance with standardization requirements. For example, we have the European Diploma Supplement, and when we develop bilingual resources, we have one that is being piloted at the moment. It's called UGR CAT, which is the catalogue of degrees offered by the university. So I wanted to mention this as an interesting fact. This has been based on TVX status, which ensures the interoperative nature that was spoken about this morning in the language technology session. And so far as we know, none of the resources on offer have adapted TVX to this kind of data. And as a final thought, going back to the title of this event, diversification of the profession and technological challenges, I consider that terminologists are a key part of complex contexts, with a high degree of specialization, high level of multiculturalism and multilingualism, and because of their skills when they manage data, knowledge, they have technological skills, and they have interest in adapting to new technologies. If we add multilingualism to all this, I think this is a very interesting niche for future graduates of this degree. They may have an important role to play in our future. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Silvia. We're doing very well with time. Thank you for that. And now, Blanca Collazos.
Bueno, pues yo os voy a hablar. Yo os voy a hablar de cómo está organizado el trabajo terminológico en la DGT, en la comisión, y en qué consiste el trabajo terminológico que hacemos, que es un trabajo vinculado a la traducción, complementario de ella y bueno, todo lo que tiene que ver con la terminología es porque está en ese contexto de traducción. Muchas de las cosas que voy a decir se han mencionado ya a lo largo de esta mañana, se ha referido a ellas Miriam, otras cosas que han dicho otros compañeros. Es un poco ir condensando todo lo que se ha dicho porque todo tiene que ver con el trabajo que hacemos. Ahora os lo cuento. Este es el organigrama de nuestra dirección general, solo para que vierais un poco cómo está. Hay 4 unidades lingüísticas, las otras 2 son de recursos. Nosotros, el departamento español está ahí en la C, ahí arriba está José Luis, el jefe de departamento de nuestro departamento, y la unidad de coordinación terminológica es esta que está aquí marcada, que es una unidad de coordinación que, como su propio nombre indica, coordina la terminología para todas las lenguas, y entonces los actores del trabajo terminológico principalmente son 2, la unidad de coordinación terminológica y los terminólogos y terminólogas de los departamentos, que hay 2 en cada departamento. En el nuestro somos... geometría variable quiere decir que hay departamentos que tienen 2, o sea, son 2 terminólogos a tiempo completo, a veces son 2 personas a tiempo completo o 4 personas, en fin, esto varía. Esta es la organización que tenemos. La coordinación terminológica lo que hace a grandes rasgos es prepara y coordina los proyectos centrales, que ahora os explico lo que son, y nos ayuda con las extracciones de yate, la creación de colecciones, todo lo que es la gestión de yate, la limpieza de yate, que es muy importante porque quienes la uséis habréis visto que hay un buen número de fichas que ya tienen un valor, que han caído en desuso, que bueno, sobre todo en las lenguas más antiguas, como es el caso del español, como yate se construyó, como sabéis, a partir del vertido de bases de datos anteriores, pues hay algunas fichas que, bueno, que hay que consolidar, que hay que actualizar o que hay que suprimir directamente, organizan actividades de formación, en fin, y nos ayudan de diferentes maneras. Y los terminólogos de los departamentos lo que hacemos pues, es trabajar en estos proyectos que ellos preparan, que consisten, ahora os enseño un poco cómo son, en crear las fichas de yate para esos términos que ellos señalan. Esa es una parte más concreta y más cuantificable del trabajo, que es más fácil de delimitar, porque sabes que tienes que hacer eso y son 950 fichas al año, en fin, es más. Y luego están las consultas, lo que llamamos helpdesk, que es simplemente atender a todos los problemas terminológicos que se plantean a nuestros compañeros en relación con problemas de traducción que tienen que ver con la terminología, y no solo de nuestros compañeros, sino muy a menudo en relación con otras instituciones, incluso externos, o sea, hay todo tipo de consultas que tienen que ver con la terminología. La administración a veces se dirige a nosotros, la administración española, quiero decir, para preguntarnos dudas. Este es el módulo de Yate, que creo que los usuarios externos de Yate, porque Yate sabéis que es una base de datos.
Yate is a database that is a public one, accessible by everyone. Most of the things that we can see in IATE can be seen in external IATE, AITE. the files that are not validated cannot be taken or considered as regular. The projects that are created by the coordination are classified here. We see them and we finish them. These projects are connected to documents that are specific that may arrive. The periods for work are connected to tight deadlines, so sometimes we cannot get the full sequence. We receive the package, we do the terminology, we then translate, we then edit. Sometimes we don't have time for all these steps, so if we can do it, we do it. Otherwise, we'll be working parallel with translation, or afterwards we carry out the downloading of the documents, depending on each particular case. These are the IATE files. I'm sure that you're familiar with them. This is quite complete, quite comprehensive. It is a primary file with the blue star that you can see here. So it is an entry that has been updated, that is comprehensive, that has been dealt with recently, that has a definition, the term with the references, notes for use that are also important. Going backwards, okay. No, this is not the right one. See here, yeah, that's it. And sometimes it is convenient to have it. Pamela mentioned that earlier. Sometimes you don't think that the term or knowing the term is enough. You have to know how to use it. So usage notes are important. AITE is not a glossary. It's a platform, a resource that opens doors to other ones. It refers to others, and it is a type of resource that can be used rationally. We have to look for information and know what to do with it. Whether the terms are synonymous, if they are fully comprehensive or not. It provides information that the translator has to use. I'd like to refer to the ways through which we can incorporate to our job with tools all the terminology that we have available in IATE. First of all, we have the extractions that are carried out monthly and that can be imported in the database. I personally believe that they are not so useful. It's too much information, it's too much noise. Some people like them, but for those of you who like them, they are there. There's another tool that can enable the plugin, the direct identification, and you are provided in real time the terms that are included in the translation that you're drafting at the moment. So AITE provides you with that. And if you filter it, then you can have the specific domain topics. This is a translation from a few days ago. Normally, if you apply the plugin, you select a term and you need to know why the database is giving you this particular term, where is it coming from, etc. You can open it, and then you get immediate access to all the information in the file in particular. So you save time in coming in and out. We use quite frequently terminology extraction with tools such as the ones that I mentioned here, especially the three ones. Syncroterm is a commercial tool. It is not proprietary. It is valid for the extraction of in documents certain candidates to become terms. Then you have to go through the list of terms and you decide which ones are valid and which ones are not. It is a monolingual extraction. So if you want it to become a database later, you have to work on that. Then DefX and TrataTerm, that are two tools developed by colleagues from the DGT. DefX is for data extraction for terms in legislation. If in a regulation you have Article 2 and 3 with definitions, you are given the terms and the definitions taken from there. If you have a regulation where you select 5 previous reference ones, DefX will give you the previous extraction. DefX can take this information to Trataterm, which is a tool that works with spreadsheets from Excel. And this is converted into bilingual lists of terms. English-Spanish is the most typical combination, but it could be another one. And you can build a database with this. And then Sketch Engine, which is hardly ever used. It's another commercial tool. The colleagues in the terminology coordination unit, with these tools, they carry out and perform data extraction that is then put at our disposal so that we can use it, and we have a platform for the exchange of extractions. We, terminologists or translators or whoever is doing the job, go there, find a translation that we want to have, and when do we use it? We use it basically with big volumes of translations that are going to be divided into several pieces for different people, and then we need harmonization there. The terminological databases that we can achieve can be mono or bilingual. I'm not going to delve into detail. Both mono and bilingual are valid to guarantee coherence, if there are many people working in the project in particular, for instance. And in some, they are quality control tools. Terminology is a quality control tool that is absolutely essential. Trataterm has a further function. Apart from creating terminological databases, you can create a profile of quality check. When you finish the translation, you can check that all the parts have been dealt with, that the terminology was consistent in the different parts, and it is unified. So this is very useful in that respect. We can create different terminological databases of various kinds. Some of them are centralized for the colleagues to be using them. They're useful when we have documents that arrive periodically. For instance, the European semester, which is an analysis of economic policies that is done every 6 months. This is one of the documents where we have more structure, more repetition of terminology, etc. And it is very helpful to be able to resort to that every 6 months. When we reach the new document, we can update it and we can send it to foreign, to external translators. For instance, the speech on the State of the Union, this changes every year as well. We call terminology many things that are different. Amongst them, the denomination of programs, initiatives of the European Union, the European Fund for Development, the European Center for Professional Development, etc. All these are coined expressions that are terminology which is part of AITE. We can also create databases. As we work with the studies, we can create a database that is empty and that can be filled in as we translate. We also think about the elements that have an influence in the terminology work. This is the micro part of terminology. What do we do with what we have? How do I decide what to do with the terminology? And this coincides with what has been mentioned already. There's an enormous amount of variety here. Hardly any document in the Commission starts from scratch. They come from previous documents. There are technical documents that are being the basis of the description. The Commission produces legislation proposals, then they have to go to the Council of the European Union, and we have a strong relationship with these institutions. It requires the collaboration amongst various experts, and deadlines are also relevant. Sometimes they're very tight, but we have to decide on terminology very quickly. According to the topic variety, we have fund, finance, environment, education, microplastics, etc. There are terms that are repeated quite frequently. The justice portal includes plenty of legal terminology, etc. We also have to respect the background. We have to respect the legal background as well. And we need to know what to do if there's an inconsistency in terminology, which is the everyday problem that we have to face in the field. If we need external sources, such as the one from the UN, etc., this also overlaps with interinstitutional terminology. How are we going to call this? In a certain document, we translate carbon removal, and then we may have absorption instead of removal, etc. And we have uptake as well. So we have removal, uptake, absorption, etc. So what do we do with that? There are problems of this kind, and the legislation says one thing, but then there's another regulation who says another thing. And these are the terminology problems that we have to solve every day. This was on Monday, and we had the regulation on microplastics.
Estos plásticos pequeñitos que, bueno, que, en fin, que se llaman granza de plástico, os diré.
This has to do with the composition of football pitches, and apparently they are very fashionable because of that. And there are standardizations that have been provided, and we have to be careful with these terms, and we have to agree as we proceed. We then have the cases in which we need to have the information beforehand. Disposal, for instance, is a word that is difficult to translate, especially in the field of waste management. There's no unequivocal translation in that sense, because depending on whether we're speaking about regular waste or nuclear waste or other types of waste, it may change. The institutional character is also relevant. The fact that we need to be in touch with our colleagues in other institutions to be able to decide what we're going to do regarding, for instance, when translating law or act that has been mentioned quite frequently in the last legislature concerning the regulations. The legal services have had a say in that regard, because European institutions are not issuing laws as such. It is regulations that we're speaking about. It is not law. Is it an act or a law or a regulation, or how do we call it? So we had to decide it, and the process of decision is still open. We're still discussing with the council, with the legal experts, with the parliament, etc. The same goes for competence. When we started speaking about that, it was a little bit against our regular terminology on skills. Then we heard comments from the representations in Spain, because the term that we proposed initially, because of extra-linguistic reasons, capacities, many people were not in agreement with it. So sometimes we're just making reference to socio-linguistic aspects, but we have to take that into consideration as well, because it's a translation that is public. I would like to finish without making reference to the consultation with experts. Sometimes the administration provides comments or observations. We may be asked about this being called this way, and we are also asked for advice. So we have the terminologist as a language expert that provides advice. For instance, life sciences, medical sciences, how do we call it? For a document on health issues, what type of professionals have to be part of the treatment of the human substances like blood. For instance, depending on the cultures, there are countries where doctors take part. In other cases, is doctors plus nurses or pharmaceutical experts, etc. In some countries, philosophers, etc. This type of discussion is quite an interesting one. And then consultations that we address the administration when it is a matter of a very technical document. It is very useful to have the documents that explain the techniques clearly. Some documents, for instance, the environment, they are very complex, and it's good to know what they believe is best. Some terms are used for the first time. This happens specifically in financial documents. We have plenty of neology or new terms that are coined in other languages. For instance, we have to speak with this Bank of Spain to be sure that what we say there is going to be accepted by the authorities in Spain. Recently, we have translated a proposal on digital euro that still is becoming a source of discussion. So we had to propose it, and we said we're going to call it this way, and then we have to wait with all the criteria available, with the consultation with the Bank of Spain, etc. And then we have to wait till this is consolidated and is validated as well. And finally, we have the limited opportunity in time and resources to externalize terminology projects, maybe once a year, on corpora that are prepared in English in several environments. It is not so easy to find the person or the institution that would combine both things, the fact that they master the domain's topic and the terminology itself. So sometimes it's not easy to have both things. We have externalized some projects, and it's been quite fruitful. So this is basically what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Blanca. Y bueno, a continuación tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Blanca. Now we'll give the floor to Paula Zorrilla. As you, if you go over your time, I'll make a sign so that you know that you've got 5 minutes left or whatever, but we're doing quite well with the time. So you have the floor. Okay, now it's okay. Yes. I'm going to share my presentation with you. I'm going to talk about where I work, what I do, and the IoT tool, which is what I'm going to talk about. Let me see if I can share my presentation.
Que podáis ver bien.
I hope you can see it. Yeah. Yeah.
Sí.
But it's not in presentation mode. I can see it in presentation mode on my computer, full screen, but it seems that you can't. One of the icons at the bottom by the volume. In my computer, that's what I have. But for some reason, it's sharing it in a different format. Let me do it again. Yes, now it's perfect. Fine. Okay. I'll talk about IATE to complement Blanca's presentation. And now you can see this particular tool and how we help translators and terminologists in their work. To start, so you know who I am, I work in the Translation Center of the European Union bodies. Its headquarters is in Luxembourg. It was set up in 1994, and it's an agency whose main mission is to offer language services to other EU agencies that are also decentralized and to other EU institutions as well. But basically, most of the big ones have their own translation department. So we mainly work for agencies. For you to see the specializations we cover, there are 50 agencies that are specialized in different fields all over the EU member states. topics from medication, air security, rail, maritime security, intellectual property, road safety, health and safety at work, occupational health with the headquarters in Bilbao. So in an ideal world, the translator becomes specialized, but in real life, sometimes we have to deal with all kinds of different specialities with very short deadlines. So we talk about generalist translators with capacity to specialize partially in different topics with the necessary resources. As I said, the main mission is to work with these specialized agencies, but we have a second objective, which is to participate in interinstitutional cooperation as well with the other EU institutions. And in this sense, our main function is management. We manage the IATE terminology project for all the institutions. So to give you some context about the system, it was set up in 2000 by the Translation Center, who started the project. Initially, it was going to be a term base for the agencies of the EU that the Translation Center works for, because the other institutions have their own term bases. There was a diplomatic effort here, and in the end, we reached a consensus. So for all institutions to join the project and for us to have a common term bank so that we would avoid parallel work, because we work in the same fields and we share many phases of the documents that we work with. So the IATE project is under the auspices of DGT. I work with the technical team. We're a small team. Don't think there are thousands of people. There are 3 specialists with different specializations, user interface, etc., all the back end here. And then we have a person who helps with quality assurance and checking all the functionalities and communication. And then I coordinate the team's work, and I work in close cooperation with all the institutions that fund and support the project to develop the tool and make sure that it evolves in accordance with user expectations and institutional needs. Here you can see the different institutions that are partners in the project. There are 9 institutions and the observer. All these institutions have a translation system and they finance IATE. So there is a very important component, as Dr. Pamela Faber said, of focusing on translation. We work on terminology for translators, by translators. We want to cover the needs of translation services. We also cooperate with the interpretation services in the Commission and the Parliament, but they don't fund IATA. We've borne their needs in mind. We've added recent functionalities to cover the needs, respond to the needs of the interpreters. But our main users are translators, the internal translators. Obviously, we also want to cover the needs of the external users to the best of our ability, and we're attentive to all the suggestions that reach us, because we do receive a lot of external consultations. Giving you some figures, we have 44.5 million searches. That was last year, between external and internal searches. About 50% come from outside, The number of entries has been reduced over time because we do filter and eliminate the data that's no longer valid. It's constantly evolving. We have more than 10,000 modifications every day by adding, enriching, modifying, etc. And with regard to functionalities, we're developing and evolving and improving all the time. We have about 4 different versions per year with new improved functionalities. I wanted to show you, because Blanca also showed you a similar slide, about how we manage terminology projects in EITE. This is quite a recent activity. For project management, this went on in the past outside EITE, but now it's within IATE, but without enough tools to deal with the workflow. So now we've come up with this module that gives us a general overview of all the phases of the project since it starts. The coordinators in charge of the project can introduce metadata. They can state whether it's confidential or not, or compulsory or not, the languages that are going to be involved, the deadlines. And then they're going to be able to upload the IATE entries in the source language, and it's visualized on in a table with the metadata. We don't need to compile this information separately or semi-manually. This module is connected to the terminology extractor that we have developed in IATE in recent years. We have a monolingual version and a bilingual version. It covers 5 languages. So candidates to term candidates can be uploaded to create the entry. It's very easy to do that. Now I wanted to show you what, after the first phase, the coordinators can assign work to both internal and external terminologists. As I said, we do work with experts, external experts as well. And so different teams have assignments with specifications, with the deadline. And when we're talking about external users, this module is the first door that's open to giving external participants the right to edit. External users have an external profile. They can't see all the data, they can't see confidential data, they can't see non-official languages, they can't change anything except the entries and in the language that has been assigned to them. So they have a special access where they can see the work assigned to them and the entries that they have to work on, the type of task they have to perform, and they can access the entry and modify it, edit it only in that language. And then there's also a part where we can see the status of each task, so the coordinator can see how work is evolving. And this facilitates coordination of multilingual projects, many of which include the 24 official languages. In the past, it was much more complicated than this, and especially coordination and follow-up. But we don't only create new concepts and new entries. These projects are also used to consolidate and to filter the database. Here on these graphs, you can see creations, modifications, and eliminations over recent months. These are entries, full entries, not terms. And so you can see there is a lot of work going on, and it will continue to be so over the coming years. All this work that Blanca has explained, this interinstitutional work with our common tool, IATE, is the result of best practices harmonized between all the different institutions and services with users, with edition rights in the database. And it appears in a short version of the user manual because the original user manual is for terminologists and it's huge. It's grown a lot because of all the recommendations, best practices. It's about 200 pages long. All this last year was reflected in a shorter guide of about 5 pages, which is aligned with principles for efficient data management that were passed last year, so that the translators departments should all work with the same principles. This morning we heard about Euramis, which is the big translation memory used in the institutions, and IATE, which is the terminology part, and so that all the tools that store data are consistent and based on the same principles that you can see here on the screen: language quality, transparency, adequate annotation, being complete, sharing and reusing data, and the management of the life cycle of the data. So it's not a question of just accumulating content, but of revising it and reviewing it to make sure that it's not obsolete, and so that we update it or eliminate it, delete it. So I wanted to mention that we have this internal guide and the user manual, which is very long, as I mentioned. And now we're transforming the internal user manual because it's static. It's in a PDF format, and given how long it is, we are transforming it into online help. We have a first version that covers the certain functionalities. It's open access, so it'll be available in different options and screens that are available for external users. There is a little icon, and if you click on it, an extract in IATA will open up, and which explains briefly what that functionality offers, and you can go, or you will be able to go to full online help soon. We're working on that now. The idea is to include all the content of the long user manual into this online help, and we think this will be more user friendly, and it'll be totally open access. So this way we will fulfill the principle of transparency that I mentioned before, making everything available to outside users. As I said before, the priorities are mainly set by the translation services. We also wanted interpreters to be able to use it more as well. And this is one of the results. To offer the results in a table. We've called it interpreters visualization. And you can see the entries are reflected in a linear form format. And this can be accessed and read more quickly by interpreters when they're interpreting in the booth or when they're preparing their assignments. Then we have this for external users, something that will help them to take advantage of all this work we do. We have searches, of course, we have searches by term, but now we have search by theme-based catalog, and this is open access now. We used Eurobook Thesaurus. This is controlled language, and it doesn't always, perhaps, it's not always easy for the user to filter by field because of the Eurobook classification. So we also use these catalogs. Now we have put them in open access so that they can be used by external users as well. Normally the keywords used in these catalogs are perhaps easier to use, and they take you to what you're looking for more easily. We have keywords such as COVID-19, coronavirus, and they take you very quickly to the catalog. You have seconds left, Paula. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think this is my last slide. I am finishing, yes. I am. We can also use bookmarks and to put certain entries in our favorites, and this is available for external users. They can use filters and they can download the data. And I think here you can see the recent metadata that we've added. The download formats are separated by commas and TVX3. It's a standard format for external use. You have to read the use conditions because it allows commercial use too, with the data that you can obtain here. And basically that's all I wanted to say. So thank you very much. I don't know if there are anything that wasn't clear, or if you have any questions, but that's all from me. Thank you.
We want to thank our 4 speakers. I hope there are some questions. This is the right time to ask them. There seems to be one here, Patricia. Yeah, the question is for Ms. Pamela Faber. You mentioned that there was some kind of specialized knowledge that is required to manage terms. What type of knowledge is that? To manage terms, you have to see, for instance, how they are connected, the conceptual relationships that are established in the definitions. You have to know what data fields are included. We have to extract the knowledge, the specific knowledge of a corpus. We do use sketch engine and a lot. And making a corpus as well. We have a corpus of more than 100 million words on the environment that we use to extract all kinds of data. So we have to know how to see what's underneath the linguistic designation, which is the term. And to do that, you have to have knowledge on cognitive linguistics. Although linguistic linguistic is a dirty word in translation.
and in terminology. O sea, se puede sacar muchísimo desde predicted argument structure.
You can obtain a lot in the argument structure
Entonces, todo
that can be extracted.
ayuda
So all this helps a lot
poder
to be able to implement
semantic network.
and establish semantic networks.
Realmente es de mucha ayuda.
It is very helpful
Quiere gestionar
when we want to manage terms in a specific field. It is very good for that. The sketch engine is also very good, yes. Any other questions? No? This is also for Pamela. When you were offered the 1 million pesetas assignment, even though it was a lot of content, how was the process to think about whether accepting it or not? I had decided not to accept it, but I did it because I wanted, I did it for the money, because I had a son that was studying to be a pilot, and that was a lot of money, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And he also told the engineer who told me to do it, Miguel Losada, you have to be available day and night and day for the terminological queries that I may have, because I don't have time. Well, I can do easy searches, etc., but he said, you can call me anytime. So I decided to do it. So money was very powerful. Then I realized that I lacked it. Then I realized that's all I know about linguistics. I have done philology. But in translation, you cannot say I come from the philology background, because you look like an outcast. So this was helpful, and I saw that it could be applied to it. Any questions? What about that sector over there? It was shy. Thank you. I believe it was in the last slide, Silvia, that you mentioned the relevance for a project to be adequate, and you said highly skilled terminologists. This is something that I thought was interesting. In the DGT, we always insist upon all translators being terminologists as well. They have to devote time, some part of the time that devote to translating, to terminology. This does not mean that one thing goes against the other, but the contribution of very qualified terminologists is one thing, and the need of our reality to be both a translator and terminologist at the same time. Do you have any idea about that? I fully agree with what you just said. As I mentioned, the people that carry out the development of these resources, we all come from translation, and then we specialize in terminology.
Claramente. Luego también tenemos gente
This is something relevant, and then we also have people who have not specialized that much, but we do train them to be able to generate terms or equivalents that are adequate when they have not been included yet. So there's feedback all the time. I believe that the profile for the terminologist is very much enriched when you have interlinguistic knowledge as well. Because of the processes and strategies for translation, you do have that knowledge, but you have a deep linguistic knowledge, and I fully agree with Pamela in that linguistics provide you with the tools to be able to create those equivalents that are relevant. Yes, indeed. I believe that there's a feedback process there. In translation, sometimes I say that the adequate name for terminologists would be a terminology coordinator, because we're all translators. I am also a translator myself. And part of the job of translating has to do with deciding upon the terminology of that document. Those of us who are devoted to terminology is to coordinate when it is required, because there are several parts that are involved, or there's another institution that is going to be the person to contact with the other institution, and this is something that is connected to the everyday life of translation, and we do not intervene in all the decisions. It would be absolutely impossible. So we coordinate when it is required, or when we need a point of contact. If I'm called from the council, I'm going to be asked, or my terminologist colleague is going to be asked. They will call the translator and say what happens with this or that. So this is the coordination function. So corpus creation is very interesting. It's all very interesting because the everyday life is much more connected to the needs, the specific needs of translation of texts. Yeah, I would be tempted to answer to what is required to be a good terminologist. And I think that in my particular case, out of 36 years devoted to my career, 27 are devoted to terminology, and I am in a very particular situation. After escaping for several years from terminology, I'm going to be back to it. So I'm being recycled at the end of my career, and there's a key word that was very valid, which is being humble. You have to be humble, because no matter your experience or how much experience do you accumulate, being humble is necessary, because even if we specialize, we have a limited specialization, because you can have queries of all kinds and validation needs, etc. So you have to know when you don't know something. So you need to handle the sources adequately. You have to find the adequate experts. It's not always easy. I had a terminologist colleague that is already retired, and for certain type of text, I say, if you are younger than 30, I tell them, call the senior engineer, because there are things that are sociolinguistic elements, and some people have a tendency towards speaking English. So we translate legislation, and a document cannot be full of anglicisms in Spanish. But anyway, I think that being humble is an additional value. It is true that we increasingly have more tools, what Pamela said, how to find the relationships between concepts. There are tools that create ontologies, you can see them explicitly. We have resources that when we started in terminology, when I was starting in 1990, everything was very manual, we were amateurs. And we have done a very amateur job. But today we have tools that enable you to explore, to analyze. So we have to be humble to learn, and to be able to ask these specialists, and curiosity to search, of course, to be documented is a fascinating kind of job. Of course, it could be difficult at some stages. There are terminological discussions that are tremendously interesting, but sometimes they have created enemies, because people were very passionate, especially with the word globalization or not, and it was very, very hot, a very, very hot discussion. It is a very fascinating and very passionate field. Well, we're doing okay with time, so I don't want to delve into detail any further. Well, there seems to be one more. Okay, just a quick question. It is directed to Blanca and Paula regarding the terms that change their meaning. that become obsolete or change the definition, are they included in AIT, or what do we do with that? Shall I, Paula? In the IATE files, we have a small field that enables to describe the term, to qualify it. We can say obsolete, admitted, preferred, I think. There are several ones. And there are terms that have become obsolete, but that should be inside the database for further reference, even though we say obsolete and the term is there. If it is not being used and we don't want to have it there anymore, we can eliminate it. But there are ways to keep it and label it as obsolete. And then in the same file, you can have another term inside the same file that says that this is the preferred one. The changes in definition are not labeled, so we have to update them. We have to erase the old one, we have to overwrite. We can do it if at a certain stage users, you yourself, find a definition that is obsolete. There's a mailbox where you can send the information, so we cannot tell everybody because they may say something, but we have to check if this is the case. If this is updated, the definition has to be done again, or we should modify the one that we have there. Pilar, I have a question for Blanca or Paula regarding the management of polysemy. There are many entries that have the same form, obviously, but we're not necessarily speaking about a different meaning. I have the impression that they do come from different domains, electronics and robotics. They have different categories, but we have a different entry. But in some cases, there are many different entries, and I wonder whether this means that they have been found in different projects and associated to domains and elements that are different, or is there another criterion? And the management of those entries and those who are multiple, is this part of the cleaning of the database? Paula, we cannot hear you. Daniel is apparently trying to achieve. Maybe Blanca can add something to my answer, but probably these are places that have been doubled. We carry out quite a regular follow-up. We have every 2 terms we have a search for indicators, etc. And the cleaning work is being carried out. So there are still cases like that. It could be the case, yeah. Thank you. So I'll give you the data. The swamp as a type of wetland. This is very much multiplied. You mean that in the same file you have several words? No, there are many files for the same meaning of the same word. Tomorrow we will change it. This cannot be. This cannot be.
Paula.
IATE is the result of a merger of many databases, and there's still work to be done in this regard, of course. In 2004, we started the internal use of AITE, so probably these old entries are due to that. If it is a low number, it's an old one. If it is a high number, it will be more recent. In that case, it's less easy to find that situation, because normally when they're more modern, this does not happen. So when we modify
Que ya existe.
a file, this modifies the term that was showing the failure, and with ways to change it and solve it. As a user, when you find that, probably when you see the files, you can discriminate the ones that are more valuable and the ones that are not so valuable. If they are repeated, probably they come from different institutions, because the databases that were downloaded in IATE from Eurodic-Autom, the Commission, etc., they could come from different institutions. And if there are several ones, if there's one that's a primary one with a blue star, that's the good one, because it is updated. So when there are several ones, some of them are better than others. Some are duplicities that have to be eliminated. So the sooner you find them, and we will erase them. And then the unit for terminological coordination, one of the tasks that we carry out is to apply criteria to select elements that are candidates for elimination. It is not easy to do it because there are 8 million ones. You cannot go one by one. The swamp one is going to be looked at, but at this speed we won't be able to do it. So we have to apply criteria that are maybe in one of the languages, or Greek and Danish, Greek, Danish and Spanish. Is it valid, etc.? Is there a reference or not, etc.? So when there are many that are duplicated, there are difficulties to discriminate which ones are more valid and which ones are not. In any case, this was not a criticism at all. It was a way to try and understand the principles, because it is an impressive task you perform in IATE, but it has to be difficult to manage because of the inherited resources, so to say, because of the many institutions that are involved and the many people that are working there. Here it's 10 of us, and sometimes we have to establish several criteria because it's difficult to show the same criteria for everyone. We do have an Excel for duplicates, etc., but it is interesting to see that due to your experience in something small, how can you discriminate in an institution like yours? It is complex to manage the duplicates if it is in the same way as it was from my time. So we have to have a multilingual idea of the file. So for Spaniard, it's obvious because this file is not correct, because it's not complete, it's old, etc. But maybe from Latvia or from Malta, with the languages, they have downloaded that there, and there's an elimination there. It was a merger rather than an elimination. We spoke about mergers in that sense. Talking about polysemy, IAT is not hyper-normative or hyper-regulatory. It is not a standard, it's not a norm. So we speak about harmonization rather. Maybe this adds a qualitative element here, but sometimes we don't have any other choice. The good IATE file is the one that documents every synonym. In Spain, in English they have waste. In Spanish we have several elements. We have residuos, desechos, different terms, and you cannot forget that. They speak about desechos in Spanish for waste, in particular, in some cases. So in Spanish, desechos and residuos both translate waste, and waste is only one in English. So this level cannot be achieved. The by university cannot be achieved. There could be some entries that include one. For instance, in the case of degrees, in all certificates you have to have one, but then we have many ones, several ones, and there has to be some harmonization because we cannot avoid it. So it's communicative text. We tend to be we tend to standardize, especially for the EU. So we're fully determined to do it, but there's a subsidiary background of other fields. What do we do in medicine? We ask for permission to reproduce terms in the technical dictionary of medicine, because we're not specialists in everything. If there's a variation, we record it. Normally, the entries that have a code and the code is connected to the concept, this is 1-1. The number of subjects is 1-1. It could not be any other way. Sometimes we found 1-5. This is quite complex. This is a very important function of IATE harmonization. The sooner we have the IATE term, how do we call it? A European Social Fund, so that it does not appear in several ways, we are going to see it as translators. Harmonization is essential, yes. And it is also very important to be proactive. It has to be done soon, because otherwise there's variation and then it's difficult to reduce it. Well then, so after this interesting exchange of reflections and comments, we don't know how to then wetland, why, you know why wetland is so popular, swamp. So we're gonna head for the coffee break. Wetland or no? No, nothing to do with swamp. So we'll have a delay again, so we will start 15 minutes later, and this will be the last one. So we will start 15 minutes later.